Members, if you want to refer to the confidential papers submitted by the power companies, please make sure that the information remains confidential. Please refrain from disclosing the information to a third party. At the meeting, members must not disclose the confidential information to the other power company. I will first invite the Secretary to speak. Thank you. At the Executive Council meeting today, the new development plans of the two power companies were approved. The Environment and Ecology Bureau also reported to the Council the outcome of the 2023 interim reviews, as well as the consensus reached by the two power companies. On the basis of this consensus, the scheme of control agreements will be modified. This exercise will take effect in the beginning of next year. In terms of the new development plans in the 2024 tariff review, it is the government's energy policy to ensure that electricity supply to the community is safe, reliable, environmentally responsible, and at a reasonable rate. And in examining the 2024-28 development plans of the two power companies, the government would only accept those capital project proposals which are considered absolutely necessary. We plan to import more clean energy in the future, and therefore the government would contain the local generation investment by the two power companies. After careful deliberations, the total capital expenditure for the new development plans are both lower than the levels in the previous development plans. Regarding the 2024 tariff review, net tariff is the rate payable by consumers. It has two main components, that is, the basic tariff and fuel clause charge. Owing to capital investment and cost escalation, the Hong Kong Electric will increase its basic tariff by 4.4% with effect from the 1st of January 2024. For CLP, it will increase its basic tariff by 3.1%. However, due to recent drop in international fuel prices, the resultant 2024 net tariff will be reduced compared to January 2023, that is by 16% for Hong Kong Electric and 7.4% for CLP respectively. The basic tariff from 2025 to 2028 is projected to increase at an average annual rate of about 2 to 3% on a par with the inflation rate. Assuming that fuel prices will remain stable, the average annual increase in net tariff is projected to be not more than 2%. As for the 2023 interim review, we have proposed modifications in a number of areas, including reducing the permitted returns, requesting power companies to share fuel costs in the event of energy crisis, enhancing the incentive penalty mechanism to enhance reliability of power supply. After rounds of negotiations with the power companies, they have agreed to modifications in the following three areas. First, special tariff relief mechanism during energy crisis. Second, a new penalty scheme for large-scale electricity supply interruptions. And third, enhancing transparency on information disclosure to the public. My colleagues will walk members through the 2023 interim review and the consensus reached with the aid of a PowerPoint. The Hong Kong Electric and CLP will then brief members on their new development plans and also the 2024 tariff review. Deputy Secretary will now have the floor. Mrs. Millie Ng. Yes, thank you. Chair, with the aid of the PowerPoint, I'd like to walk members through the interim review of 2023 as explained by the Secretary. Having had rounds of negotiations with the two power companies, they have agreed to modifications in the following three areas as shown on the PowerPoint here. First, the two power companies have agreed to introduce a special tariff relief mechanism during energy crisis. That is, from their non-scheme of control accounts, funds will be taken out to provide a special tariff relief. This will be triggered during an energy crisis as a result of geopolitical tensions, natural disaster, or unforeseeable market volatility, where there is persistent surge in fuel prices, leading to an increase in the total tariff of more than 20% for Hong Kong Electric or more than 10% for CLP. So in such an event, a special tariff relief will be provided to the most needy user households. Now you will find a difference in the percentages applicable to the two power companies respectively. This has to do with a different fuel mix. We checked the 2022 figures when there was apparently an energy crisis. The increase in total tariff for CLP was 15%. As for Hong Kong Electric, the increase in total tariff throughout the year was 39%. So based on the 2022 scenario, in the middle of the year, basically, this mechanism will be triggered owing to the extent of increase. Now, when this mechanism is triggered, the two power companies will make provisions from their non-scheme of control accounts to provide a special tariff relief to the low-consumption residential households. This is subject to a cap. For the Hong Kong Electric, the cap is $180 million. I mean for CLP. For Hong Kong Electric, after deducting contributions to the Community Energy Saving Fund and other concessionary tariff program for disadvantaged groups, 100% of the incentives earned by shareholders in the year of the Hong Kong Electric will be provided, and that's about $55 million. Now, these two power companies differ in terms of their scale of operation and their customer bases, hence a different set of figures. The specific amount of subsidy for each household under the special tariff relief mechanism will be determined in consultation with the government. Reference will be made to the magnitude of increase in the fuel cost charge and other actual circumstances. We're unable to set an exact amount at this point because there are a lot of uncertainties surrounding an energy crisis. What is important is that funds will be set aside from their non-scheme of control accounts to provide relief to to needy households, especially low-consumption residential households. The second measure, subject to the outcome to the 2023 interim review agreed by the two power companies, is that in the event of a large-scale electricity supply interruption, a new penalty scheme will be put in place. A new performance index will be set up, and that is called the Customer Interruption Duration, or CID. This will form the basis in considering whether penalty will be meted out. Now, the calculation of the CID is very simple. It is a sum of the products of number of customers being interrupted and duration of power interruption expressed in minutes. In a large-scale supply interruption incident, some customers may experience power outage for 10 minutes and some for a much longer period of time. So there are different groups of affected customers. Hence, we need to do a summation of the product of the two factors I mentioned. We have adopted a two-tier approach in metering out penalties. Let me just go through this table. For the CLP, if the supply interruption goes beyond 15 million minutes, then there will be a penalty of minus 0.015%. If it goes above 30 million minutes, then the penalty adjustment will be one of 0.03%. So for the Hong Kong Electric, likewise, if the interruption goes above 5 million minutes, then a penalty will be correspondingly meted out. In fact, we've made reference to the MTR's adjustment mechanism. For Hong Kong Electric, if the interruption incident lasts for over 5 million minutes, then roughly we're talking about $10 million of penalty. If the interruption goes above 10 million minutes, then the level of penalty is $20 million. This will be adopted in the modified scheme of control agreements. However, interruptions due to severe weather conditions, third-party damages, requests of customers, or planned events approved in advance by the government say, for example, maintenance works or any other force majeure events, they will be excluded from the new penalty scheme. Average serviceable hours or supply restoration mechanism currently adopted by the scheme of control agreement will not be included under the new penalty scheme. The third measure, as agreed by the two power companies, is that in the annual electronic information booklets, there should be more information transparency in the following areas for disclosure to the public. Information related to fuel costs and fuel procurement, breakdown of operating expenses and staff establishment, related party transactions and loan borrowing, performance targets achieved and rewards earned under the incentive penalty scheme, as well as information on the Community Energy Saving Fund funding, as well as the achievements of the fund. Through the interim review, we hope to achieve the energy objectives of safety and reliability of electricity supply, affordability, and ensuring that the two power companies would shoulder corporate social responsibilities and tide and weather the storm together with the public during an energy crisis. Now, for the three modifications I mentioned, details can be found in Annex B1 and B2 of the paper just tabled for members' reference. As for our way forward, we will sign a written agreement with the two power companies to include the content of the annexes in the scheme of control agreement. Basically, we will be incorporating the content of the annexes in the scheme of control agreements that which will be modified without any other addition. We hope to complete this exercise in just 1 or 2 months.
I'll invite representatives from the two power companies to speak. I'll first invite representative from the Hong Kong Electric. Who will speak? All right, Mr. Francis Chang. I'll speak first and Mr. Ho will elaborate. Good afternoon. To achieve the carbon neutrality target, we have built 3 natural gas units to replace the old units. We also have worked with the CLP on the LNG offshore terminals. We also help install meters for customers. We have been working on these and we have achieved progress. We will devote $220 million to minimize emissions, also to ensure stable power supply to tackle extreme weather conditions. We'll also enhance the natural gas use in our fuel mix. We'll also strengthen our power grid. With the increase in cost in operation, we'll have to increase the power tariff by 5 cents. Each unit will cost 19.5 cents. The use of natural gas will increase by 20% compared to this year. But we have seen a drop of fuel prices, so there can be a larger drop of tariff. Next January, the FFC will be 46 cents per unit, which is a drop of 44% compared to this year. With a drop of fuel prices, we are able to lower the basic tariff. Therefore, next year, the net tariff from HKEC will be 165.5 cents per unit. It is a drop of 16% compared to this year. Also, we will put in $56 million to reduce carbon emissions, as well as offer support to those in need. We will strictly control the cost as well as increase productivity. Lastly, I'd like to stress that we have seen a drop of fuel prices, but we are still seeing a high level of fuel prices. Also, we're seeing geopolitical tensions. In the coming year, there will be volatility in terms of fuel prices, I believe. Now I will invite Mr. Bill Ho to tell you more about the development of the HEC in the coming year. Mr. Ho, please. Good afternoon, members. I will make a recap of the development plan between 2019 to 2023. I'll also tell you about the development plan for the coming 5 years. Afterwards, I'll talk about the tariffs change. In the past few years, HEC has been reducing carbon emissions to achieve the carbon neutrality target in Hong Kong. Also, we have built new units to replace the old coal-fired units. This is the core of our work. The 2 new generating units have commenced operation, and another one will commence operation early next year. To ensure that we can roll out competitive tariffs, we procure natural gas from around the world to ensure stable supply. We have been working with CLP on the LNG offshore terminals, which have started operation this year. Also, in the 80s and 90s, the unit that commenced operation back then has become old, and it has reached the limit of its service life. We have eliminated 2 such old units. Next year, another 2 old units will retire. The coal-fired units will remain at 3, and we will reduce our reliability on coal in terms of power generation. We have entered the era of low carbon emission. After our hard work, the 4 major emission pollutants have dropped compared to 2005. In the coming year, natural gas use will increase to 70% in terms of our fuel mix. To tackle, for instance, black rainstorm as well as extreme weather conditions, we have to enhance the resilience of our generating units. Therefore, in the coming 5-year development plan, we will devote $22 billion in our plan to strengthen our efforts in reducing carbon emissions, as well as to address climate changes. In terms of generating units, we will work in line with government policy objectives to reduce carbon emissions. For instance, we will build one natural gas-fired unit to replace a coal-fired unit to maintain sufficient generation capacity and improve environmental performance. Also, we will build 3 oil-fired open-cycle generating units capable of fast startup to replace 4 similar old units to cater for contingencies. We will carry out improvement works of 2 coal-fired units to extend their service lives, as well as to enhance their efficiency to ensure that they will operate until 2034. This is en route to achieving the 2035 decarbonization target while we try to maintain reliable power supply. We will also strengthen the power grid to meet Hong Kong's development as well as the needs of our customers. We will build transmission and distribution substations to cater for electricity supply to large-scale projects in the eastern and southern districts, as well as the city's other developments. Also, we have seen aged underground cables and facilities in substations. We will upgrade our facilities step by step to ensure power reliability and power quality to minimize fluctuation and volatility. By 2025, we will also complete the installation work of smart meters so that we can help Hong Kong to develop into a smart city. Also, we will roll out different flood control and wind protection projects to improve our system resilience against extreme weather.
So much for the 5-year development plan. I will now go through the tariff adjustment. Comparing to January 2023, the average net tariff change is 31.5 cents per kilowatt hour. There is a need to enhance our power structure and upgrade our power structure, and the capital investment will cause an increase of the basic tariff by 5 cents. For natural gas, the percentage will go up. The use of natural gas will go up by 20%. With drop in international fuel prices, fuel clause charge will be reduced by 36.5 cents. As a result, the average net tariff in January 2024 will be 16% lower than that in January 2023. That is 165.5 cents. Let's take a look at this chart. As you can see, our tariff is lower than that in other cities such as Tokyo. You can see from these charts that there is a lagging effect, but the fuel clause charge continues to fully reflect price fluctuations, and we are subject to government's monitoring. We don't benefit from the price fluctuations of fuels. Fuel prices have been stabilizing and easing somewhat, but they remain relatively high. We will continue to monitor the geopolitical tensions and the market volatility as a result. This table shows the expected changes in tariff during the 5-year development plan from 2023 to 2028. The annual adjustment will range from 0.7% to 2.7%. In the future, the tariff will be subject to different factors, and we will review the tariff in due course. $56 million will be set aside to promote smart power services to support the needy groups in the community. We will also help promote carbon emission reduction and the use of renewable energy to achieve carbon neutrality. We will dish out the $200 cash coupons to the underprivileged groups and SDU households. There will also be extensive public education to promote a green and smart lifestyle. To summarize, in the 5-year development plan from 2024-2028, $22 billion will be committed to capital investment to enhance our infrastructure and to meet the various objectives, such as carbon emission reduction, such as strengthening the power grid and enhancing system intelligence and automation. The average net tariff for January 2024 will be 165.5 cents, which is 31.5 cents lower than that in January 2023. That is a 16% reduction. So much from me. Thank you. Next, I will invite the CLP representative to speak, Mr. Law. Thank you, Madam Chair. Please switch on to his mic. Yes. Is it coming through? Madam Chair, members. We will brief members on the 2024-28 Development Plan and the 2024 Annual Tariff Review. As Hong Kong emerged from COVID-19 pandemic in the past year, we have resumed full normalcy. As announced in the policy address, in the coming few years, the government will continue to create impetus for economic growth, integrate with the country's development, as well as bolstering our unique strengths as an international city. In the coming few years, Hong Kong will experience high-speed development. That means a lot of infrastructure projects will be coming on stream, which will cause a surge in electricity demand. In the coming 5-year development plan, the CLP will fully support the government's initiatives to cater for the increased demand for electricity so that we can give support to Hong Kong's position with the mainland's support as well as being connected with the world. In August, September, we experienced more frequent extreme weather events, posing significant risks to the day-to-day business of Hong Kong people. We will allocate resources in response to that, such as low carbon or zero carbon strategies, so as to build our resilience against extreme weather events so that we will continue to enjoy worldwide recognition as a power supply company. We will continue to implement energy-saving measures, enhance customer experience, and promote smart city development. The CLP understands the public's concern on electricity tariff. We have always strived for a stable power supply at a reasonable rate, and we have been achieving this objective through prudent fiscal control and adopting different fuel mixes, procuring different energy sources, importing affordable nuclear energy and clean energy. Nuclear energy has played a significant role in recent years. It has also made significant contributions to emission reduction. International fuel prices have dropped and the pressure is eased. Between January and October 2023, the special rebate as well as government subsidies have helped balance the books. About 22% of the CLP bills for domestic households show that they are not required to pay anything for the electricity bill. Comparing to 2023, the net tariff for CLP will come down by 7.4%. This will help lift the burden on needy households. In the coming 5 years, the net tariff rate for the CLP will remain stable. From 2019 to 2023, through Community Energy Saving Fund, some $800 million have been set aside by CLP to support different strata of society, the needy groups in the community, and to encourage energy efficiency. In 2024, we will continue to leverage on the fund. $200 million will be set aside, $7 million of which will be used to support underprivileged groups such as subdivided unit households. We will provide subsidies to needy households and also help enhance electricity safety at home. Now, through the fund, the CLP also subsidizes eligible NGOs and schools in installing solar panels. We also launch consumption coupons to help boost local spending. Mr. Zhong, my colleague, will give you more details. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Law. Under the Scheme of Control Agreement, the CLP has been operating efficiently, meeting the government's target. Our tariffs are lower than comparable cities. With over 80% surge in the demand for electricity, the CO2 emission dropped by 90% during the same period of time. For carbon intensity, on a yearly basis, it dropped by 60%. In September this year, Hong Kong experienced Super Typhoon Saola and the once-in-a-century black rainstorm warning. Under the extreme weather events, we managed to provide stable power supply. In the past 3 years, the power interruptions duration was lower than the comparable cities. This is due to proper planning and investment to build our resilience. Our team also has good responsive strategy. Now, we are going to invest $52.9 billion to meet certain objectives. First, to support Hong Kong's emerging and traditional industries to meet the needs of new development and housing production, to maintain world-class reliability of power supply, to continue with decarbonization strategy, and to build a resilient smart city against extreme weather events. With infrastructure projects coming on stream, there will be a surge in the demand for electricity. Our capital investment will focus on enhancing the district networks to support the northern metropolis development as well as new data centers and housing productions. We will continue to enhance our infrastructure to meet the increase in demand for electricity. And to meet the decarbonization strategy, the offshore LNG reception terminal was commissioned this year to further diversify our fuel mix. And we are building the next generating unit. This gas-fired unit will be commissioned in 2024. Apart from increasing the ratio of natural gas in the fuel mix, we will also foster collaboration by introducing more renewable energy. And we will help clients install smart meters. We will strengthen our network and develop the battery energy storage system as well as pilot the hydrogen blending scheme. This table shows the new tariff to be introduced in 2024. The average basic tariff in 2024, or average net tariff, is 142.9. That's a 7.4% decline comparing to the January 2023 level. Basic tariff will go up by 2.9 cents up to 96.6 cents, with international fuel prices dropping from its peak. The fuel cost charge will be reduced by 15.7 cents down to 46.3 cents. Despite the drop from its peak, as you can see, for international fuel prices comparing to the beginning of 2021, the prices have remained high. There are still uncertainties surrounding the external economic situation and the energy markets. We will keep in view the situation. Now, using the current international fuel prices as a basis, our estimate is that for 2024 to 2028, the net tariff is expected to remain moderate. We will continue to exercise fiscal prudence and keep the tariff at a reasonable rate.
明年會
Next year, we will set aside about 200 million Hong Kong dollars to our community supporting scheme. This includes providing subsidies to the underprivileged and also ensure safety for households. Customers will also install meters for subdivided units occupants. Will also subsidize schools and NGOs to install solar photovoltaic systems. Will also roll out F&B vouchers. Will also subsidize businesses to replace air conditioning systems and energy-saving systems. To conclude, in the coming 5-year development plan, CLP will fully support the economic development of Hong Kong and continue to reduce carbon emission. It is expected that the power tariff in 2024 will remain stable, as well as in the coming 5 years. Thank you. It's now time for members to ask questions. I'll read out their names. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, Mr. Chen Pui Leung, Mr. Edward Leung, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung, Mr. Michael Luke, Ms. Carmen Khan, Mr. Michael Tin, Mr. Chen Kin Po, Mr. Lau Kwok Fan, Mr. Gary Zhang, Ms. Chen Yut Ming, and Professor Lau. 4 minutes for each member. Questions and answers included. Please give enough time for the relevant parties to answer your questions. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok will go first. Thank you, Madam Chair. We are discussing the scheme of control agreements of the 2 power companies today. We must not forget our initial thoughts. We have to ensure reliability, affordability, as well as the environmental performance of the 2 power companies. We will see an increase in the basic tariff of the 2 power companies. However, with the drop of the international fuel prices, there is or will be a decrease in the average tariff. We are seeing good news as well as bad news. If international fuel prices go against what we have projected, say there may be an energy crisis, or if the energy crisis persists, what should we do? The 2 power companies mentioned that there will be special relief scheme in times of energy crisis. However, such mechanisms can only be put in place for a certain period of time. If the power tariffs remain expensive, it will spark concerns of the public. We also see that under the SCAs, there will be an adjustment to the return. We are seeing a high interest rate environment. The percentage of return may be comparable to the loan interest rate. Also, I see that the 2 power companies have boosted its technical aspects, and the reliability reaches 99.9%. In the past, even with power outage incidents, the 2 power companies may still benefit under the reward and penalty scheme. So, I'm glad to see that there is the new penalty scheme for large-scale electricity supply interruptions which respond to the public's demand. We will have to meet the 2050 carbon neutrality target. We are seeing the projection for 2028 for now. And there will be just 20 years left until we get to 2050. I wonder if there is enough investment put in to reach the target for 2050. I want to have some responses from the power companies. Perhaps the Secretary can respond first. Secretary, this concerns the strategies. As mentioned, there are 4 overarching objectives. They have to be reliable, safe, affordable, and also we look at the environmental performance. We have to ensure supply of zero carbon energy. CLP will strengthen its power supply from Daya Bay Nuclear Power Station. Also, in the long run, in Cheng Kwan O will build a facility there, and it will supply 35% of the zero carbon energy. So 70% of the power supply will come from zero carbon energy. That is until 2030. And we have been working towards our goal, and the 5-year development plan from the 2 power companies is in line with our goal. Therefore, they are not building new generating units. The Hong Kong Electric is building 1 more unit, and that will be able to meet our target. So we have a strategy in place. We have a decarbonization strategy, and the financial plans and all the other strategies are in line with this goal. Madam Chair, I don't have very clear statistics that show the plan of the 2 power companies. If the 2 power companies are not making enough investments, I wonder if we can really meet the carbon neutrality goal by 2050. That's my worry. Perhaps we can explore more about this in the future. Mr. Cheng Pui Leung. Thank you, Madam Chair. I see that the 2 power companies will drop its tariffs by next year. However, the basic tariff will still see an increase. Because of the change in international fuel prices. CLP will put in some $500 million, and for HEC, it will put in some $500 million for the investment, and that creates pressure for the 2 power companies. My question is this: in the long run for the basic tariff, there's basically not much room for lowering the basic tariff. Now that the 2 power companies have come up with their 5-year development plans, will there be the situation that the 2 power companies will have made enough investment in the coming 5 years, and that it won't have to make further investment in the 10th year, so that there won't be any further increase to the power tariffs? I wonder how the government can guarantee that the tariffs can be contained to a certain level. I believe the question is about whether further investments will have to be made by the 2 power companies after the 5-year period. Mr. Chang from the Hong Kong Electric. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have to ensure stable power supply. That's an important mission on our part. We also have to look at our environmental performance. We also have to ensure that the power tariff is affordable, and also we have to ensure safe power supply. By replacing the generating units, we can ensure safe and stable power supply. We can see from other countries that the generating unit can really affect the reliability of their power supply. So we have to strengthen our power grid. And we have to make the relevant investments. And these are subject to stringent approval and vetting by the government. So does that mean we won't have to make further investment after the 5-year period? I don't think that will be the case. We'll have to take into account whether we're importing more energy or if we are relying more on our own local generating units in terms of the investment scale. Power supply is an important cornerstone of the development of a city, and it also helps ensure the competitiveness of our city. Mr. Law from CLP. Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand that the public is concerned about the level of power tariffs, so we prudently look at our financial position and we try to contain the power tariff level. Compared to other major cities in the world, CLP's tariff is quite competitive. The average basic tariff of CLP has been frozen at the same level over the past 3 years. With inflation and other factors, we have only adjusted slightly the power tariff this time around. In terms of investments, as mentioned in our PowerPoint presentation, there are a few factors that we consider. To put it simply, we want to help drive economic growth in Hong Kong. We want to address the housing needs of Hong Kong. We also want to build a resilient power supply system, and we want to help Hong Kong develop into a smart city. These are our goals. Mr. Edward Leung. Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't have enough time to read all these documents, as these are only tabled at the beginning of the discussion item. I think the public needs time to digest all these details. Members of the public are concerned about the power outage incidents that happened in April. Was there only reward but not penalty in the incident? We want to plug the loopholes in the interim review. If, say, similar power outage incidents happen after interim review, will there only be rewards but not penalty? I see that the current penalty system proposed will look at the duration of power interruption throughout the year. If it is lower than 80 minutes, a reward will be given to the power company concerned, meaning that the more supply interruptions there are, the more reward the power company concerned will get. So this is a loophole that we have to plug. If we look at other service providers, say MTRC, it is a performance-linked system that we're talking about. Say, if service is interrupted for a certain period of time, then MTRC will be penalized according to the duration of interruption. If we follow a similar system, then perhaps we can plug the loopholes. How come we do not follow the system of other public utility service providers? Why are we looking at the duration of power interruption throughout the year under the reward penalty scheme? Thank you.
Secretary. Mrs. Ng will respond to this question, please. Yes, Madam Chair. Under the current scheme of control agreement, there is an incentive penalty mechanism. Even without the new penalty incentive scheme for large-scale power interruptions, there is already a similar scheme in place. So it is not the case that they get rewarded for power outages. Now, responding to the member's question on the average, then the more frequent the power outage occurs, the more detrimental it would be for the power companies. There is an indicator for hours of usable service that is to provide incentive for maintaining reliable power supply. On the contrary, a penalty will be meted out if reliability cannot be sustained. In relation to one-off incidents on a very large scale, we have introduced a new penalty scheme, and the two power companies have agreed to this new penalty scheme in a modified SCA. I still have time left, right, Chair? This is not about the average usable hours of service. I'm talking about supply restoration under the customer performance incentive penalty mechanism. So the more frequent the power outage incidents occur, the more incentive they get. You haven't responded to my question at all. Secretary, let me explain that we're talking about three different concepts. First, about the serviceability of the system. If it's maintained at a very high level of reliability, they get a reward. The second concept is that there is a penalty under the new penalty scheme for large-scale power supply interruptions. So this scheme can address the issue of averaging out the incidents. Mr. Kwok Wai-Kao. I think it is some sort of good news that next year there will be a tariff decrease, but it is still not very affordable since the tariff is just coming down from its peak. The rate of decrease in the tariff is honestly quite limited because of an increase in energy prices, an increase in the basic tariff rate. Anyway, I want to comment on the three new measures to be introduced after the interim review. The first one is a special tariff relief mechanism during energy crisis. But there are shortcomings. First, it will come from non-scheme of control accounts. That means additional revenue on top of their normal operations. And there is a cap for the CLP is $180 million for Hong Kong Electric. According to the 2022 figures, this cap is $55 million. Not to mention that the relief will only be provided to low-consumption residential households. Before the expiry of the scheme of control agreements, is it that we cannot do anything about the 8% permitted return? That's the first point. Second point, that's under paragraph B, new penalty scheme for large-scale electricity supply interruptions. Now, this paragraph refers to interruptions due to severe weather conditions, third-party damages, force majeure events, so on and so forth. They will be excluded from the scheme. That means the scheme will only apply to their own wrongdoing, so to speak, and it's not part of the customer performance incentive penalty mechanism that is currently in place. In other words, if something goes wrong in the power company's operation, that there is an offsetting mechanism in the sense that no extra incentive will be provided, and that's all. Why is it that we cannot mete out real penalties? Mrs. Ng? Mr. Kwok asked 2 questions. First, on the interim review and the same permitted rate, the rate of permitted return. In fact, we put forward this proposal to the 2 power companies as a result of the feedback we received during consultation with the stakeholders as well as the Legislative Council. Perhaps the 2 power companies can, in a moment, explain to members their response to our request to review the rate of permitted return. Responding to the other question asked by Mr. Kwok, and that the new penalty scheme will somewhat offset the existing incentive scheme. Yes, we do provide incentives to encourage an enhancement in their performance, in maintaining reliability, in saving energy, so on and so forth. Likewise, a penalty system is put in place to deduct a certain percentage point from their permitted return under this mechanism. At the end of the financial year, the books will be matched to see if any deduction will have to be made out of the permitted return. Still, we need to look at the bigger picture for the whole year, whether they have performed up to standard. For the permitted return, the power companies are accountable to their shareholders. So deducting their incentive payments is one way of monitoring. Yes, let me supplement. For non-scheme of control accounts, under the special tariff relief mechanism, we want to make sure that the money would come not from the scheme of control accounts, but from the shareholders' pockets. Let's let the 2 power companies have the floor. Mr. Chang and Mr. Law from the 2 power companies, can you please take the question on adjusting the 8% permitted return? Yes, Mr. Chang. The objective of the scheme of control agreement is to balance the aspirations of various stakeholders. Power companies are required to shoulder long-term investment commitments and risks and proceed with different infrastructure in order to support government objectives. We are also required to provide reliable electricity supply for our clients, and we have strived in achieving this balance in containing our expenditure. And the government also plays a pivotal role in gatekeeping. As we negotiated with the government, we went through quite a difficult process. At the same time, we've rolled out different relief measures to help the underprivileged in the community. As far as the spirit of the scheme of control agreement is concerned and development of the energy market in Hong Kong, I would say that this current mechanism is well established and effective. Mr. Law? Thank you. The CLP has strived to provide and supply electricity at a reasonable rate. Comparing to comparable international cities, the CLP, as mentioned, offered a tariff that is really competitive. Say for Singapore and Sydney, their tariffs are 30 and 80% higher than the CLP tariffs, respectively. As for New York, is 100% higher. Energy supply is an industry that requires investments of a massive scale and a long horizon. We also need to raise funds to support infrastructure development in order to maintain world-class service. Mr. Luk Shung-ho. For grassroots, they need to pay a lot of bills. They have a hard time as well. It is only reasonable for the public to expect the drop in tariff. I would say that for the scheme of control agreements, there is a guaranteed return of 8%. That is the 8% permitted return. When some members of the public say that the CLP will set aside $200 million to help the community, and that's really a largesse, the Hong Kong Electric at the same time will also allocate the funds to help build a smart city. I would say that the devil is in the details. This is because the two power companies have obtained a guaranteed return of 8%. And they are just setting aside a small portion of what they have earned to help the community. In other words, this is still a business with guaranteed profit, not a penny less, in other words. And of course, the two power companies will put their shareholders' interests first. Well, they look after other people's interests, only that they are not accorded the top priority. I'd like to comment on the special relief tariff mechanism during energy crisis. Again, this is just a drop coming from this big bucket of profit. I am quite disappointed. So my question for the Secretary is this. The government made a lot of effort in negotiating with the power companies. In the end, the two power companies refused to budge, not even 0.1%. The permitted return now stands at 8%. Even in the face of fuel price fluctuations, the two power companies still refuse to budge. They maintain the pass-through approach and transfer costs onto customers. Do you think that the two power companies have actually fulfilled their corporate social responsibility, Secretary? Well, when it comes to public utility, subjective sentiment is involved. I just want to say that in this round of review, we've introduced a special tariff relief mechanism during energy crisis. And under this mechanism, funds will come out from the non-scheme of control accounts. That means the money will literally come out of their shareholders' pockets. They will come out from their profits. So during an energy crisis, according to the estimate, the CLP's profits may be reduced by up to $180 million. As for the 8% permitted return, we've heard calls in the community for the permitted return to be lowered. I want to stress that the scheme of control agreements will last up to 2033. Any modifications to the schemes will have to be discussed with the power companies. They indicated that they would not change their stance over this matter. So we work on other areas such as the special tariff relief mechanism and penalty schemes and enhancing transparency on information dissemination. So at this point, I'm afraid this is what we can do. Now, I want to stress that, first of all, the two power companies have agreed that they should shoulder responsibility during energy crisis. And they also agreed that for large-scale electricity supply interruptions, they should again shoulder responsibility. There will be another review in 2028, and by then, with more extensive use of new energy, we will have a better bargaining power. On this basis, I think by then we will be having more prerequisites in negotiating with the power companies. Now, what about increasing power import from the mainland. Let's not wait until 10 years down the road when the Changguan facility is commissioned. Can we break new grounds by increasing the import for Northern Metropolis, for example?
We can consider that if we want to have more power supply from the mainland, we'll have to make arrangements for that. We need time to prepare for that, if that's the case. Ms. Carmen Khan, the Secretary mentioned in his remarks that the government will strive to reduce the permitted return of the two power companies, and we see that the government has failed to do so. Also, the government promised to work on the incentive penalty scheme. Well, we can assess whether the government has achieved its goal. Back in June, there was a motion passed by the member on power tariffs. The Secretary said it will step up monitoring of the financial positions of the two power companies. It will look at the investment and the operating expenditures of the two power companies. This includes considering incorporating the operating expenditure into ANFA in terms of the calculation. Understand that you may not be able to adjust the 8% permitted return of the power companies, but I wonder if you can adjust the calculation formula. It looks like the government has failed to do so. The government has only achieved its target on enhancing transparency on information disclosure to public by the two power companies. And this includes disclosing more information through the electronic information booklets. But the power companies will only disclose information about what has already happened. I wonder if the government can work harder on adjusting the 8% permitted return of the two power companies. My second question is about the special tariff relief mechanism during energy crisis. I understand that you will look at the total tariff to see if the tariff will reach 20% for HEC, for example, when you decide whether the mechanism will be triggered. You will add up the basic tariff and the fuel cost charge when you calculate the total tariff. Why do you not only look at the fuel cost charge? Let's say if the FCC exceeds 20%, then you can trigger the mechanism. Also, the overall impression I get is that the CLP's proposal is more straightforward. As for the proposal from HEC, it has to deduct contributions to community energy saving fund as well as other concessionary tariff program. It will also have to look at the incentives earned by its shareholders when it pays the special tariff relief. So what kind of idea is that? I understand that for CLP is $180 million, but the proposal from HEC is less straightforward. Also, on the CID index, that is the customer interruption duration, what do you mean by duration of power interruption? Are we talking about an accumulated period of time? Also, I understand that HEC will have more generating units and CLP doesn't have such plan. And according to page 7 of the papers, HEC will have this L13 generating unit. Will this have anything to do with the development plan between 2023 to 2028? Secretary, can you give a brief response? We put the cap at 10% and 20% for the special tariff relief mechanism. Basically, the basic tariff won't change. What will change is the FCC. So for CLP, if it exceeds 10%, and for HEC, if it exceeds 20%, will trigger the mechanism. Because we'll look at this single factor, meaning that it will be the same. Because the basic tariff will remain unchanged. Every year in January, we fix the basic tariff. Perhaps you'll have to talk to Ms. Carmen Can about how you calculate the percentage after the meeting. It's hard for you to explain this in details. Yes. Mrs. Millie The only varying factor is the fuel clause charge. For the public, it's easier for them to know the change of the net tariff. So we adopt the total tariff for easier understanding. For HEC, in times of energy crisis, they are willing to take money out of the shareholders' pocket. That is the incentives earned by shareholders. Under the current mechanism, there is a community energy saving fund, and the fund also comes from the shareholders. So we propose to deduct contributions to community energy saving fund so that the fund won't be affected in times of energy crisis, and also the $5 to $6 million of fund devoted to help the underprivileged will not be affected either. In terms of how we calculate it, say for the cable incident in Yunlong, the duration of power interruption was 38 million minutes. As mentioned, for some customers, they were affected for a few minutes, for some over 10 hours. So we add up the total duration of power interruption, that's the idea, for one single large-scale supply interruptions. Mr. Michael Team. Thank you, Madam Chair. Last year, today, I looked at the 2013 to 2023 figures. For CLP, it was 47%, and for HEC is 46%, and the inflation rate was 24%. Back then, I lashed out on the government on its failure to contain the tariff level. I also met with the financial secretary asking him to set up a $200 million fund. In case there is a huge fluctuation of fuel prices, then we can take money out of the fund to contain the level of the power tariff to ride over the inflation. But this didn't happen. Well, this year we're fortunate, but who knows what will happen in the coming years. If we look at 2014 to 2024, the increase of CLP is dropped to 29%, and for HEC it's 22%. The inflation was 21% during the 10-year period. Well, we were lucky. Our party, the Round Table, we do not blindly support the government, and because the power tariff level is in line with the inflation rate, we do not object to the plan. Also, we ask that your incentive and penalty scheme to follow that of the MTRC. For MTRC, they have a grace period. Why don't you look at the duration of service interruption each time? I don't see why we need incentives here actually. Are you trying to incentivize or encourage the service providers to restore services? I don't understand why different ideas are adopted for the power service providers and the railway service providers. The more investments the power companies make, for instance, for wind power investment, the higher chance that we're seeing for increase of power tariff. You're now saying that you're trying to control costs and trying to control staff establishments. You're willing to disclose the information, but you promise to monitor the situation. I'm asking that you hold one meeting every year so that we have a chance to examine all the investment projects on renewable energy for the two power companies. We want to know what kind of renewable energy they're working on. Is it solar power or wind power or other types of renewable energy? This is what I would like to push for now. One year ago, we had a similar discussion, but the situations haven't changed much. Secretary. For the incentive penalty scheme, as mentioned, the SCAs will go on until 2033. Under our current SCAs, we want to strive for improvement. After negotiations with the two power companies, what we can do is we can add in a new penalty scheme. Going forward, if there are new SCAs in place, will we make further adjustments? I believe we can have further discussions with the two power companies. As for what kind of green investments projects that will be rolled out by the two power companies, for large-scale investment projects, we will definitely report them to the Legislative Council. But for the smaller-scale ones, I guess we don't have to hold a special meeting for that. Do you promise to hold one meeting every year for us to learn about the special investment projects as well as the financial positions of the two power companies? Can you guarantee that? We'll talk to the two power companies. Please fight for that for us. We only have a few minutes of time to discuss about this here. Mr. Chan Kin-po. I think we have to fight for a low power tariff for the public, but at the same time we want to ensure a reliable and safe power supply system. There are views that the permitted return should be adjusted downwards. I understand that the government has put forward this proposal to the two power companies, but the two power companies rejected the idea. The two power companies have adopted a hard-line approach, but the government did not force the two power companies to compromise. I guess this is the right approach. We should demonstrate to the world that Hong Kong respects the spirit of the contracts. Hong Kong is an international financial center, and we cannot easily change the contract terms. For this 15-year SCAs, any changes will have to be agreeable by the two parties. And the two power companies have been making investments. And with these investments, we are able to see a reliable, affordable, and safe power supply system. As mentioned, the power tariff in Hong Kong is cheaper than that in Singapore and other cities. Therefore, I personally support this outcome of the interim review. I think regardless of how much pressure we're facing, we should not breach our contract, which is the cornerstone of our business operations. I hope the government can keep in mind this point. Do you require a response from the Secretary? Secretary, I thank Mr. Chen for the comment. For this interim review, we try to stick to the SCAs during our negotiations, and we have conducted an interim review adhering to the principle of the agreements. any new changes or modifications will have to be agreed by both parties. So we have stringently adhered to the contract terms.
Next, Mr. Lau Guangfan. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a price drop because of a drop in international fuel prices. I think in the future, the tariff changes will mostly come from energy price fluctuations. For natural gas prices, they have come down to the 2021-2022 level. As for the latest fuel clause charges, it's still 200% of the level in 2021-2022. So prices have not come down quick enough when international prices drop. Is there any room to improve this mechanism so that we can decrease tariff quicker, so that the changes in tariff can be made more frequently in line with price fluctuations? Next question about future developments. We are going to have the Northern Metropolis project, taking this infrastructure-led approach. Apart from railways and roads, power supply is a critical infrastructure. Now, CLP just now mentioned that there would be investment in the northern part of Hong Kong for supporting infrastructure such as the data centers. My question for the CLP is whether there are estimates relating to the capital investment in, say, the North District, and whether there will be collaborations with the mainland. Is there a plan? Of course, under the infrastructure-led approach, you must have made out some plans. Secretary, let me first make a start, and then CLP can address the issue on Northern Metropolis. Now, in the budget for the 5-year development plan, I understand that they have included the Northern Metropolis project about raising tariffs very quickly, but decreasing the tariffs not quickly enough. Now, for natural gas, the levels are still 30% higher than the 2021-22 level. We go through the figures with them one by one, but we understand that the 3-month average figure is the basis in updating the tariff. Mr. Law from CLP. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the fuel clause charges, the adjustment is based on changes in fuel prices. So, in fact, in 2021, take Brent crude oil price. The price was about $54 per barrel. Then the prices jacked up to $140. As of October, the unit price stood at $90. So this is a trend that we have and will continue to observe. As for Northern Metropolis, indeed, we're going to make investments in order to meet the energy demand for housing production and the development of new industries. At this point, we do not have specific figures relating to the Northern Metropolis initiative. I can only say that for new housing production, in order to meet the energy demand, we are going to make an investment of up to 30%. Do give us some papers later on so that I know more about your participation in Northern Metropolis. Finally, a word of praise. We do have a very reliable system, be it typhoons or heavy rainfalls. We enjoy stable power supply, and I really appreciate that. I need to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Every year we look at these figures. It's like we're taking the math exam. I have some questions. First, about the basic tariff. The capital investment between 2018-2023. Take CLP as an example. $56 million were approved. Now it's $52.9 billion. So in the next 5-year cycle, the capital investment should be less than the previous cycle. In 2019-2023, for basic tariffs, it rose by 3%, and then next year it will go up by 3% again. Can you explain the rationale? Why is it that in the coming 5 years, despite a drop in capital investment, there is still an increase in the basic tariff? Second question, I don't understand the figures at all. It so happened that the Hong Kong Electric and CLP both experienced a major event. Can you tell me, under the new penalty scheme, will these incidents that they experienced some time ago trigger a penalty? And how much would this penalty be? Also, about the special tariff relief mechanism during energy crisis. Can you tell us in what way will it offset the tariff increase? Next, about interest rate and the permitted return, as pointed out by some members. I seem to remember that when calculating the permitted return, there would be a deduction of the interest rate of up to 7%, if my memory serves me right, as mentioned in the previous paper to LegCo. Another question is on new energy investment. How does the government strike a balance between new energy investment and easing the tariff increase pressure? Tariff Stabilization Fund, that's the other question. For CLP, it will drop drastically. For Hong Kong Electric, again, a drop, but not to the same magnitude. Can you explain the trends? Who will take the questions, please? Secretary, Mrs. Ng will explain the special tariff relief mechanism as well as the new penalty scheme. CLP can take the other question on the tariff increase. Mrs. Ng. Mr. Zhang asked a number of questions. He talked about the two incidents and whether the incidents would trigger the new penalty scheme. For this Yuen Long incident, if the total hours of power outage reached 30 million minutes, as in the Yuen Long incident, under the new penalty scheme, a penalty of $40 million in the higher tier will be meted out. For the Hong Kong Electric incident, I seem to recall that the total duration of power outage was not as long, just 1 million minutes or so. So for the incident on Hong Kong Island this year, it would not trigger this penalty. Now, about special tariff relief mechanism and by how much the tariff will be shaved. First, we are not sure when this special tariff relief will be triggered. We are not sure by how much energy prices would be spiked. As explained in the paper, during an energy crisis, when there is a surge in fuel prices, the two power companies should discuss with the government to decide on the amount of tariff relief to be dished out to the low-consumption residential households in Hong Kong. We want to keep things flexible. Of course, we want to avoid an energy crisis as much as we can, but when it happens, we cannot foresee the extent of the crisis. And on this occasion, they have given an undertaking to fork out money from the non-scheme of control accounts to provide relief. Perhaps apart from helping the low-consumption residential households, extra subsidies will be provided to the underprivileged groups. But this is, of course, subject to discussion between the government and the two power companies. About the Tariff Stabilization Fund, there is a difference. I think this is due to an increase in electricity sales of the CLP that accounts for increase in tariff. For Hong Kong Electric, the sales performance dropped, so the tariff increase is not on the same magnitude as the increase in CLP. And anyway, the fund on this occasion helped stabilize tariff. Next, Ms. Chen Yuming. Thank you. Madam Chair, we are discussing the scheme of control agreements. Members have add their views on the two power companies, including tariff increase and the implications. And I also welcome the new measures under the interim review as agreed by the power companies, such as the special tariff relief mechanism and the new penalty scheme. I see that the government is urging the two power companies to shoulder corporate social responsibility. Now, on this note, I want to refer to the EV charging target in the policy address this year. In government buildings, there should be 7,000 charging points, and also by 2027, there should be 200,000 parking spaces equipped with EV charging facilities. There is a government policy to promote the installation of EV chargers. But I understand that this scheme has come to an end. In this year's policy address, as I have just mentioned, there is a target on EV chargers, and we're talking about power supply today. I'd like to urge the two power companies to shoulder corporate social responsibility. You should support the government's initiative in the policy address, that is to provide 7,000 and 200,000 EV chargers in private premises respectively, especially in the rural areas. We have the rural area committees, so the power companies can install EV chargers at these common areas. As for solar panels or photovoltaic panels, because of limited space, not all village houses can install rooftop solar panels. Please consider the capacity of power grids in the countryside so that you can improve the power supply system for recognized villages in rural areas and outlying islands. Secretary. Well, let's invite the two power companies to respond to Ms. Chan's concerns. Mr. Chang from Hong Kong Electric. About charging facilities in buildings and communal areas, we have been making an all-out effort in installing chargers. We also devote resources to help private building owners complete energy audits and ensuring stable power supply. So we've made a lot of efforts in this regard. Now, for the countryside, I'm afraid that the Hong Kong Electric does not cover a lot of remote rural areas on the island side. For solar panels, we have not rejected any application for large-scale installation of the panels. For CLP, we support the government's policy on EVs. The government in 2020 rolled out a scheme to encourage EV chargers in private housing estates. Since then, the CLP launched a support service to help install EV chargers in private premises. We received 547 applications covering 132,000 parking spaces. 93% of these applications have undergone assessment by the CLP. In terms of T&D, we will continue to enhance our distribution network. As mentioned by another member, for renewable energy initiative in the past 5 years, we have continued to strengthen our power grid to accept more feed-in tariff applications. So far, 20,000 applications have been received, with over 300 megawatts of electricity, renewable energy generated.
A few members are still waiting to speak. If members do not object, I'll extend the meeting for another 15 minutes. Professor Lau. We've been discussing the scheme of control agreements, and members have been mostly concentrated on a few areas, including the components of power tariffs, as well as how the two power companies address the demands of the public, etc. So we have covered the content of SCAs as well as the composition of the power tariff. With the monitoring by the government, the Legislative Council, as well as the public, it seems like we're at a point where there is not much we can do. I understand that the two power companies will devote some of their resources to support people in need. This is commendable. For a long period of time, we have seen stable power supply from the two power companies, and the incidents we saw were very rare. When I was little, when there was a power outage, we had to take out candles, and we had to light up the candles. We don't want to see the penalty system being triggered, of course. I want to focus on one thing about our discussion, that is about enhancing transparency on information disclosure to the public. For operating expenses, well, we've been talking about AI these days. For instance, ChatGPT may replace clerical expenses, and AI, with the adoption of such technology, we may need fewer staff establishment. I wonder if the operating cost can be compressed with the use of technology. For fuel prices, well, we won't know what will happen next year that will affect the fuel prices. However, we can proactively look at the use of technology such as AI that may help compress the operating expenses, which may in turn have an effect on the level of power tariffs. Secretary, I thank Professor Lau for the comments. Professor Lau has a point about the use of technology which may help lower operating costs. We will explore this in the future. We'll talk to the two power companies about this and see what else they can do to lower the costs of their operation and also lower the power tariffs for the public. Now it's my turn. I see that the government is able to reach some sort of modifications with the two power companies in this interim review. I thank your effort for being able to do that. There will be a drop of 16% and 7.4% in terms of the power tariff. I think some members of the public are surprised about the drop. Well, my view is that, of course, I welcome the drop of power tariffs. However, fuel prices are subject to changes and fluctuation. We are facing wars in different parts of the world, and we are facing some geopolitical tensions, and there are uncertainties that cause the changes to fuel prices. Does this drop of power tariff represent the whole year drop of power tariff? Some are of the view that there is still an increase in terms of the basic tariff. Well, it's not a significant increase. It's a 4.4 and 3.1% increase. So I hope the government can talk to the mainland to import green energy to help mitigate the impacts brought by the fluctuating international fuel prices. If we can be certain that we can import green energy, then the two power companies will not have to invest a lot of resources to build, for example, facilities for wind power. The effectiveness of these projects may not be significant, but the two power companies will have to devote lots of resources in these investment projects. Well, we're not seeing the two power companies making huge investments this time around, so it's not causing a huge impact on the power tariff level. Also, I'm happy to see that the two power companies are willing to devote resources to help the people in need. Say for CLP, some of the money will be from the incentives. What if there are no incentives? Does that mean that power companies won't devote resources to help the needy? Also, on the incentive penalty system, I believe that most people in Hong Kong would agree that there should just be a penalty system in place in case of supply interruptions. There are still lots of incentives given to the two power companies. Can you list out what kind of incentives that the two power companies may get? Also, as other members mentioned, can you look at the supply interruptions individually instead of looking at the duration of power interruptions throughout the year? For this new penalty scheme, there was a large-scale incident which would make CLP fall under this new penalty scheme, but for HEC, what happened on their side will not fall under this new penalty scheme. I understand that this is not very fair. A lot of residents on Hong Kong Island were affected. Their electric appliances broke because of the incident. If with such a large-scale power outage incident that happened on the Hong Kong Island, and HEC was still not subject to penalty system. Would it be not fair? Also, how do you calculate the minutes? Can you use a language that is easier for the public to understand? Can you not use minutes as the unit when you calculate the duration of power interruption? Can you use hours, for instance? And under what circumstances will the new penalty scheme be triggered? I think CLP and HEC are renowned for their stable power supply system. I think we should not penalize the two power companies. However, we did see large-scale incidents that took place in the past year. And if the penalty mechanism could not be triggered under such circumstances, it would really give the impression to the public that this is not fair. Secretary. For this penalty scheme, we look at the incidents individually. If the incident triggered the mechanism, then we would penalize the power company concerned. We want to make the system as stringent as possible. However, as mentioned, any modifications will have to be agreed by both parties under the current SCAs. We have to also take into consideration that the penalty we impose on the two power companies will have to be comparable to each other. We can't be lenient to one company and strict or harsh on another company. So we look at the number of customers being interrupted in a single incident as well as the duration of power interruption, and we add up the two numbers. So we see that if we take the cable bridge incident as an example, $40 million will be fined and the mechanism would be triggered. It is the highest level fine or penalty that we would see under such an incident. For Hong Kong Electric, we saw an interruption of 1 million minutes, and it was just 1/3 of the duration of power interruption compared to the CLP incident. For the HEC incident, for some of the customers, they were only affected by, say, half an hour. So according to our calculation, it was just 1.8 million minutes, and compared to the lowest level of 5 million minutes, there was still a distance. So the penalty system was not triggered in that particular incident. Also, as mentioned, we have two incentive systems in place. We look at the reliability as well as the time required for maintenance. If the level reaches a certain amount, well, we won't give as many incentives. Say if there is large-scale electricity supply interruption, then we have the penalty scheme in place. So we are adopting a three-pronged approach to encourage the two power companies to perform better. And this is also to help us tackle large-scale power outage incidents. For large-scale incidents, well, do you apply the same standard to the two power companies? For CLP, they serve more customers, and their service cover a wider area compared to Hong Kong Electric, so their scale of services really differs. If you do not use the same numbers, that may not be fair. So we look at the proportion. For CLP, the threshold is 15 million minutes. For HEC, is 1/3 of the 15 million minutes. So it's about 5 million minutes for the threshold.
Mr. Gary Zhang, We are approaching the end of the meeting. I will extend the meeting by 10 minutes, but I will give you just 2 minutes. I asked a lot of questions, some of them not yet answered. First of all, I subscribe to the chair's views. Now, for the Hong Kong electric incident, if it wouldn't trigger this mechanism, then I think it's a far cry from what the public expects. Now, why is it that in terms of the minimum duration, CLP has a threshold 3 times longer than the Hong Kong Electric? In terms of the scale of operation, they differ. Also, for rebate for the MTRCL, the rebate comes in the form of fares. For the tariff relief mechanism, 180 million and 50 million respectively, or 55 million respectively. I think that we still need an explanation of how you've come by these two figures to level with the public. Also, on basic tariff, in the past 5 years, for CLP, the capital investment exceeded the next 5-year cycle. But why is it that the tariff increase exceeded the level of increase in capital investment? Sorry, I need to refer back to the Tariff Stabilization Fund. For the CLP, the number is dropping. That's not what I said just now. For the Hong Kong Electric, it's on the rise. So I don't think the government's explanation is sound. Who will take the question, please? Mrs. Ng or Secretary? Madam Chair, just a point of information. For residential households, I stand to be corrected. For Hong Kong Electric, about 600,000, right? About 600,000. For CLP, they serve 2.7 million households. So that's roughly slightly more than 3 times. So the calculation is based on the customer size. I will invite CLP to supplement my answer on the tariff increase, as asked by Mr. Gary Zhang, and also perhaps a further explanation on the Tariff Stabilization Fund, Mr. Law. The CLP has all along strived to control expenditure and operating costs. In the past 3 years, we froze the basic tariff rate at the same level. This is the first time after this 3-year freeze that we introduce an adjustment because of escalating operating costs and fuel price changes. So this adjustment is not the same as what happened in the past 3 years. What about the Tariff Stabilization Fund? Why is it that there is a very different approach adopted by these two companies, right? Why is it that in 2027-28 for the Tariff Stabilization Fund there is a surge, whereas for CLP the prices are dropping? I think you've misunderstood the information. For the Tariff Stabilization Fund is about $500 million, and then 2024 some $300 million. In 2027, I mean the healthy level stands at about 200 to 300 million. Right. Perhaps you should follow up on this question after this meeting. Finally, the Secretary, the two power companies, anything to add? No? If not, then that wraps up our discussion of this item. I think there are still lots of questions to ask. Anyway, last item, AOB. On the 6th of December 2023, I will submit the panel's report to the Legislative Council. Members should have received a draft for your reference. If there is nothing under AOB, meeting is adjourned.